Hi guys, today we are going to look at the 5.4.3 assignment and explain how that is done because it's 6 pages long and it's a beast. So I'm here for you. That's what I'm doing. I'm here for you. All right, guys, so I have zoomed in so you can see everything on this page and it's not very, very tiny. So I'm gonna read it loudly for you and you're going to answer those questions on your own. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what ended World War I? Your objective is to identify one cause of the end of World War I. So we have looked at the beginning causes, what caused the war. Now let's look at the reasons why it was able to finally end in 1919. So here we go. Here's our timeline. Your directions are to examine the timeline below, then answer the questions that follow. So let's go ahead and read this timeline together. All right, so June's 1st, so let's do the June. June 28th, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife are assassinated in Sarajevo. And July and August of 1914 to 1915, the nations that make up the two major alliance systems in Europe declare war on one another. By September of 1914, first trenches are dug on the Western Front. By the end of 1916, the longest battle of the war, the Battle of Verdun, is fought to a draw with the estimating of 1 million casualties for both sides. So the longest battle lasted almost a year, so February to December of 1916, and it ended up in a draw, so nobody won, and there's over 1 million casualties. Million people dead or wounded. That's insane. Insane. All right. July to November of 1916. So going on in the exact same time frame as this one, the Battle of the Somme results in an estimated 1 million casualties and no breakthrough for the Allies. So two large battles and 1 million casualties each. That's insane. Both are in France, but in different parts of France. All right, so let's go ahead. In January of 1917, a message known as the Zimmermann Telegram is sent in from the German government to the German ambassador to Mexico, authorizing him to promise Mexico a part of the United States that it previously lost if they supported Germany in the war. Many Americans supported the United States entering World War I after the telegram was discovered. There's an interesting story behind this as well. In April of 1917, the United States declares war on Germany and joined the British, French, and the Russians. By 1918, 2 million United States troops arrived in Europe. The newly fresh troops, supplies, and money from the USA provided the final push needed to defeat the Central Powers. All right, let's go to December of 1917. After revolution led by a group named the Bolsheviks and a man named Vladimir Lenin, who took over the government, the Russians leave the war by signing an armistice with Germany. Armistice means they're done fighting. June of 1919, peace treaty signed by German delegates and allies in Versailles, France. All right, so here's our timeline. Let's go ahead and take a look at those questions. Question number 1, based on the timeline, describe the progress of the war between 1914 and 1917. So for this question, you are going to have to summarize what was it like at the beginning and what was it like at the end, right before American soldiers showed up. Okay. And number 2, what effect did the United States entrance into the war have? So what effect did having the United States come into the war have on the war? What was its effect? Go ahead and pause here, answer those questions, and continue to page 2. Okay, next section. What were the consequences of the post-war agreement? So we're now looking at the consequences of the agreement that was made after the war had ended. Okay, so you are to make a prediction. At the end of World War I, 8 to 9 million soldiers died in the battlefield, and almost 22 million soldiers were wounded. The question on the minds of many leaders were, what do we go, or where do we go from here? So here are the peace settlements. Directions: read the excerpt, so it's a chunk of reading below, and respond to the questions. Okay, I'm going to read this aloud to you. This is a picture of the signing of the peace, the signing of peace in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles in 1919. And let's go ahead and read this aloud. Peace arrangements after the war. On the 4th November 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire agreed to an armistice to stop fighting, and Germany agreed to an armistice on 11 November of 1918, officially ending the war and victory for the Allies. In January of 1919, the Paris Peace Conference convened, which means met, at Versailles, just outside of Paris, to establish the terms of the peace after World War I. Though nearly 30 nations participated, the representatives of the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and Italy became known as the Big Four. The Big Four dominated the proceedings that led to the creation of the Treaty of Versailles, a treaty that ended World War I officially. The Treaty of Versailles articulated, which means clarified, which means cleaned it up so that it was very, very clear, the compromises reached at the conference. It included, now remember, compromise means that you don't fully get what you want, right? So keep that in mind when we say compromise. Reached the conference. It included the planned formation of the League of Nations. So the creation of something called the League of Nations, which would serve both as an international forum and an international collective security arrangement. So a place where you can discuss things internationally, of what's going on internationally, and a security arrangement to help police the world as a whole. The United States President Woodrow Wilson was a strong advocate of the League, as he believed it would prevent future wars. So he was a strong proponent. He was a strong cheerleader for it. The nations that joined the League of Nations agreed to settle disputes or arguments rather than go to war. Even though Wilson created and promoted the idea of the League of Nations, the United States never joined. The League lacked an armed force, so it did not have an army or military of its own, and depended on the members' nations to keep their word to follow through on resolutions. All right, so here are the questions that you need to answer. So what was the purpose of the Paris Peace Conference? What was the name of the treaty that ended World War I? What was the League of Nations and why was it formed? And did Wilson's League of Nations accomplish his hopes? And explain why it did or did not. Go ahead and pause here, and then you can answer those questions and move down to the next page, page 3. Okay, now we are at how did the post-World War I world order contribute to the collapse of the worldwide economy? Let's say that one more time. How did the post-World War I world order contribute to the collapse of the worldwide economy? Okay, so your objective is to describe how the Treaty of Versailles impacted ordinary people in Germany. All right, here we go. Here, we're going to examine the Treaty of Versailles. Our directions, we're going to read the excerpt below, and we're going to respond to the questions found below. All right, the Treaty of Versailles was one of the peace treaties at the end of World War I, and it officially ended the war between Germany and the Allied powers. The terms of the Treaty of Versailles were announced in June of 1919. Even though German politicians were not consulted about the terms of the treaty, they were shown the draft terms in May. So it started in January, Now we're in May of 1919. They complained bitterly, but the Allies did not take any notice of their complaints. Germany had very little choice but to sign the treaty because they couldn't stay in the war anymore. All right, let's go ahead and look at those questions that you are going to pause and answer. There's some interesting parts, so we're going to do it together. All right, so Treaty of Versailles here is part of the treaty. Here's some text. Article, which means like a law, like a part of the law. Article 159. The German military forces shall be demobilized and reduced as prescribed hereinafter. Okay, so demobilized means no more military, less military. Okay, so what is Germany required to do in Article 159? How might this impact Germany from Article 159? And how do you think this made Germans feel and why in Article 159? Now let's look at Article 160. First, by a date which must not be later than March 31st of 1920, the German army must not comprise more than 7 divisions of infantry and 3 divisions of cavalry. So it could not have more than 7 infantrymen divisions, so groups, and no more than 3 mobile groups. All right, so what were they required? How might this impact Germany? How do you think this made Germans feel and why? Okay, the next chunk. Article 231. The Allied and associated governments affirm and Germany accepts the responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and the associated governments and their nationals have been subjected as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and her allies. So what is Germany required to do here? How might this impact Germany? How do you think it makes them feel? All right, Article 232. You can pause and answer these questions. Article 232. The Allied and associated governments recognize that the resources of Germany are not adequate. The Allied and associated governments, however, require, and Germany undertakes, that she will make compensation, which means payment, for all damage done to the civilian population of the Allied and associated powers and to their property during the period of the belligerency, or the war, of each as an allied or associated power against Germany by such aggression by land, by sea, and from the air, and in general, all damage. So I'm just going to tell, this one's kind of wordy. They have to pay for everything, all the damages to the allies, including themselves. They have to pay for the entire war. Germany does. So what are they required to do? I just told you. How might this impact Germany? How do you think this made Germans feel? What do you think they're going to do to pay for that? Go ahead and pause, and we'll move on to page 4 or 3. All right, document analysis. So we're going to examine the images below and respond to the questions. So here's document 1. Reparations, remember, means repair. There's 55 billion marks that they have to pay back for the war. American Contemporary View of German World War I, Reparations. It's a political cartoon created in 1921. Here's Germany being with the amount of money that they have to pay. All right. So what do you see? What does this mean? So you have to infer. What do you think it means? In your best guess. And what does this political cartoon reveal about the impact of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany's economy? So in other words, what do you think this is saying about Germany and like their money, their financial situation, that kind of stuff? Go ahead and pause and move forward once you're finished. All right, let's look at this part of the document. Every man becomes civilized between the ages of 18 and 23. If he does not go through a civilizing experience at the time of this part of his life, he will not become a civilized person or civilized man. The men who went to war at 18 missed the civilizing. All you young people who served in the war are a lost generation. You have no respect for anything. You drink yourselves to death. Gertrude Stein on the American expatriate writers living in Paris after World War I. Now, summarize this document in your own words. What is it saying? And what effect did the war have on ordinary people, according to this source? Go ahead and pause here, answer those questions, and when you're ready, move forward. Okay, document 3. So this is an image of German children are starving, it says. What are your observations? What do you think it means? That inferences, what do you think it means? And what does this political cartoon reveal about the impact of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany's economy? So in other words, what do you think this is telling us about the financial situation of Germany after World War I and because of the Treaty of Versailles? Go ahead and pause, answer those questions, and we'll move forward. Okay, Treaty of Versailles synthesis. So this is going all together, collective. Number 1, did the Treaty of Versailles create a permanent peace? Explain why or why not. Number 2, how might the Treaty of Versailles have impacted Germany's relationship with other countries after the war? Number 3, how might the Treaty of Versailles have impacted Germany's perception of itself? So how do you think the Treaty of Versailles, where they didn't have anybody with them, or they didn't get to go and make any choices, and then when they did find out, they saw it like right before it was signed, and they said, we don't like this. This isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. But you have to sign it anyways because you lost the war. How might the Treaty of Versailles impacted Germany's belief of themselves? Go ahead and answer those questions, and when you are finished, then you're done with the assignment. Goodness, it's a very long assignment. All right, guys, we are done. Finally, that was a long one, but you guys did it all. And if you made it this far and you send me an email and you put Treaty of Versailles as the title, I will give you 5 points extra credit. All right, guys, I hope you had a wonderful time learning about this. And if you need anything, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, compliments, go ahead and send me an email. If you want extra credit, send me that one with Treaty of Versailles on it. All right, guys, until next time, I'll see you. Bye.